Hello, it's Penny here. Welcome to another reading vlog. This week, it's looking quite possible that it might be my last week of freedom. I haven't been working since the beginning of April and I've been having a great time, really enjoying it. But it's possible from next week I'll be working. Not confirmed yet, but possible. So I guess this week I'm going to be trying to get ready for that. But also, I have 2 books from the library here that are both second books in series. And what I want to do is read these, but also before I read these, I have the first books from each of these series in audiobook form. So I'll listen to the audiobook and then read the book. So firstly, I've got Fevered Star. This is the sequel to Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. It's kind of like pre-Columbian mythology inspired, like early American mythology. And it's kind of got this celestial prophecy that all the main characters are coming together for. To be honest, I'd forgotten a lot about the first book. And I haven't even listened to much yet. I've listened to 9% and pretty much just had a chapter from the 3 main characters introducing them. Serapio was blinded by his mother, who seems to have some kind of religious ideas about what he needs to be. Then we had, I've always called her Ziala, but listening to the audiobook, it sounds more like Chiala. And we don't know much about her yet, except that she's woken up in jail and she doesn't know how she got there. But this guy's come along to ask her whether she will pilot a ship. Is that the right word? Be in charge, captain a ship to this place. It would have to be a really quick journey. She said it's impossible, but he's offered her a really good deal for it, so she's willing to take it on. And then we also have this other woman who is like the priestess. I forget. I just listened to it and I've forgotten her official title already. But she's kind of like a servant leader, so I guess we'll learn more about her as well. So I've already had a few times where I feel like I'm picking things up from the introduction that I didn't the first time I read it, because actually, the first time I read the first book, I really thought it was going to be a science fiction. I don't know why I thought that, but every time they were talking about celestial towers and different things to do with the stars, I thought we were actually going to go to the stars. I thought they were talking about spaceships and other planets. No. And so reading it with the proper context of it's a fantasy actually is helping me to understand it a lot better. So that's a fairly short audiobook, and I'm hoping I can get through it pretty quickly so that I can get into reading this. And then I will start listening to the audiobook of Middlegame in preparation for reading Seasonal Fears by Seanan McGuire. So technically, the Middlegame reread might not be necessary, because this is more of a companion novel from what I understand. But the audiobook was available, and while I'm reading Fevered Star, I will need an audiobook to listen to. So I may as well listen to Middlegame and then be prepared for Seasonal Fears, and maybe it'll help me to kind of see more connections between the 2 books. So Middlegame is about Roger and Dodger, who are these twins. One has the power of language, one has the power of mathematics, and they kind of have this connection. But also there's these alchemists trying to manipulate them into becoming gods. I really loved it the first time, so I'm hoping I'll love my reread as well. And then I can get into Seasonal Fears, where I think there is a couple who have seasonal powers. I am a bit worried that this one's going to disappoint me, so hopefully it won't. But I guess we'll see. Hello, so quick update on Black Sun. Yesterday I managed to get 70% of the way through, which I think is pretty good for one day of reading. Definitely the book feels a lot shorter than it did on the first read. And I don't know if that's just because this time I know what's going to happen, learning about the characters. It's just reminding me of what I already know. And so it's not that sense of discovery like it was the first time I read the book. And also I think the audiobook makes it feel quicker as well, rather than reading it physically. But that said, I feel like I don't have much to say, 70% of the way through, and I still feel like it's setting things up. So Serapio and Chiala are traveling to the place where they're going. They're still on the ship, having some terrible times, but I knew all these things were going to happen. The Sun Priestess, she's also having a terrible time, but again, I knew that was going to happen. Oh, and there is actually one other character. He's the son of one of the clan's rulers. And there's this cult, I guess, that's really against the Sun Priestess and the tower. And he's possibly getting lured into that. I can't remember exactly what happens with that, to be honest. Also, I think part of why it feels really slow is that because we're getting just a little bit of all these characters, and we're also getting Serapio's backstory, of his training. And so once you split it across all those characters, really each character has only had a couple of chapters. And so it's not really a surprise that not much has happened for each of them yet. But I do remember that the ending was quite exciting, so hopefully. What I'm going to do now is go for a walk. It's freezing today, but also really sunny, and I suspect it might be warmer in the sun, so I'm going to go and walk in the sun. You can see it's pretty sunny. And I think if I go and walk to the mall and do some errands, then we should actually be able to finish this one off, and then we can start reading Fevered Star, which I'm excited about. I'm also excited because I've forgotten a lot of what happens at the ending of Black Sun. So we'll see if I remember once I reread it. Hello, so I'm back from my walk and the sun was lovely, but not actually warm. This is the problem with winter. So I'm back in this room with my heater where it's nice and warm. So, a few things. Firstly, I finished off Black Sun, and the ending, I'm very glad I reread it because I kind of remember my first read. The book ends with like a bunch of bodies, some survivors, some not survivors, and I think I maybe misread some things the first time I read it, or I wasn't clear on exactly what the deal was with certain bodies. This time, I'm a lot clearer on what's happened, and so I think that sets me up really well to go into the next book. I don't have the next book with me, but I did notice at the very front of it, it has a section where it lists all the characters in their different clans, and the ones who didn't survive the first book have like lines through them. So that's actually quite useful as well. So I think I'm prepared to go into Fevered Star. Probably I will read it tonight. I'm not sure. The other thing that I did though is I went to the library and I picked up not a book. So I got Rule of Wolves audiobook CDs because my library doesn't have the e-audiobook through Libby or BorrowBox or any of the systems they have. And I was thinking about buying it through Audible, but then I saw the library has the CDs. So I thought, well, that's free, I'll get it. But it's 16 CDs. 16 CDs that I will have to listen to, and I can only listen to them on my stereo. And yeah, it's just strange because it even says like Audible on the CDs. You know? Like what? Anyway, it says Belinda as well, which really means I should be able to get it through BorrowBox because BorrowBox normally has a lot of Belinda audiobooks, but apparently we don't have this one through BorrowBox, but I've got the CDs. It's really not helpful because I can't take CDs on a walk with me or anything like that. But anyway, I'm not going to read this week, but maybe next week or the week after. Anyway, I just thought it's funny that I've got all these CDs. I did it once before with like I think one of the Farseer books from the Realm of the Elderlings. Anyway, then the last thing that I did is I did open up the audiobook for Middlegame. I have played 30 seconds of it and then I stopped because the audiobook narrator said her name and it's Amber Benson. Amber Benson was Tara in Buffy the Vampire Slayer series, and as well, if you don't know, the Dresden Files audiobooks are narrated by James Masters, who played Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, Buffy actors doing very well with audiobooks. I do know actually Amber Benson wrote a book at one point, and I was going to read it, but then I never got to it. I still do want to read it at some point. Anyway, so it'll be interesting to listen to that, and I'll compare her audiobook narration style to James Masters. Buffy actors against each other. But I am going to try and brave the house outside this room in a bit and like try and declutter my pantry. I have a bunch of decluttering I need to do. So while I do that, I'll listen to Middlegame. Maybe I'll take some breaks and read Fevered Star and we'll see where we get to. Okay, so yesterday I started listening to the audiobook of Middlegame and it was so hard to make myself put it down and start reading Fevered Star because I think with it being a reread, I already feel so connected to the characters and I can see how all the things that are happening are going to hurt Dodger so much. And so like I'm getting emotional before we even get to the actually traumatic bits. And as well, Erin. Now, whenever I say Erin is my favorite character in Middlegame, people who've read it are like, who? Which is so sad. you guys are missing out on Erin by not paying attention. Because Erin's story is even more tragic because she doesn't even get the ending that Roger and Dodger get. And already she's going through awful things, but she works just as hard as Roger and Dodger to get the final outcome. I don't remember, did I tell you what Middlegame is about? I probably did, right? It's about these twins who are separated at birth, and then there's this alchemical society trying to manipulate them into becoming gods, but gods that are under this alchemical society's control. So there was a lot of that. In fact, it was well over an hour, I think, before we actually got to Roger and Dodger. And while that bit is interesting, I think on a reread all through that bit, I was like, yeah, but can we just get to Roger and Dodger already, please? So it is a little bit of a slow start, but I think I remember on the first read that I found all of that stuff still very intriguing. And I didn't not enjoy it on a reread. I just was like, yeah, I know, get to the point. But I did pick up on some things that I had forgotten, so I am glad I'm doing this reread because I do suspect some of those things with that group that's trying to manipulate these children through alchemy, I think they're likely to be important in the second book as well. So we'll see. I did make myself pick up Fevered Star though. It's definitely hard to compare this to Middlegame because I feel with Middlegame I'm just so attached to those characters, whereas these, even though I think the characters are really interesting and the world is really interesting, I'm not as attached to them. And I kind of want to say that's because this is multiple perspective and we haven't really gotten that much time with each of the characters. But I mean, I just said in Middlegame that we spend a whole bunch of time with these old alchemists rather than Roger and Dodger. But I feel like there's something about Roger and Dodger that just makes you connect to them straight away. Something that makes them really relatable. But anyway, this one, I got 80 pages in, which is not bad. Although not much has really happened other than like getting back, setting the scene. So I am actually at the moment watching Covers with Cassidy's reading sprints, and I'll try and get some more progress with this while those are happening. And I'm probably also going to do some housework. And while I do that, I will definitely be listening to Middlegame. The challenge is going to be making myself read this, even though all I want to do now is read Middlegame and not even do any of the other stuff I'm supposed to be doing. But I'll try and be controlled and like stretch Middlegame out. We don't need to rush through it. We can savor the enjoyment. Maybe. Hello, good morning. So yesterday, somehow I ran out of time very quickly, and then I ended up staying up really late trying to actually make some progress on this. So I managed to get about halfway through, but now I'm like super tired and it's already halfway through the next day. Was it a good idea to stay up and read it? Probably not. Anyway, what I found is I'm a little bit frustrated with the fact that we're following different characters because two of our characters met up in a way that was very exciting, and there was magic and gods and it had the potential to be really cool. But then, just before we found out what was going to happen, we skipped to another character's perspective and then we haven't gotten back to those main characters. And I just want to know what's happening with them. Like, they are the most interesting characters. And while I'm sure the other character is going to come in and be very important to the plot, at the moment, what they're doing is not as interesting. So I guess my problem isn't really with the multiple perspectives. It's just the way that it's been broken up kind of feels like it stopped the momentum. And I think it works better if like all the characters' perspectives are doing something exciting at the same time. But when you switch from something really exciting to something kind of and boring, like, oh, let's have a meal because we need some food, like that's very anticlimactic after being like, wow, we've got these gods having a battle with each other, you know? But still, the stuff with the gods kind of being at war with each other and how that's playing out through some of our characters is really interesting. And we're learning a little bit about the past and how that has influenced that. I just still feel a bit like we're in setup mode with this book, which is interesting because when I read the first book the first time, I didn't feel like that at all. I felt like we had a really clear direction. But then knowing what happens at the end of that book, I just feel like, and the different powers that are trying to participate in it, and I don't feel like we've gotten to the actual crux of what's going on and what the story is yet. But I'm going to try not to lose my whole day today, and I'm going to try and make some more progress on this today. Actually, I'm going to try and finish this today, but we will see whether that is at all possible. The other thing that I'm also halfway through is Middlegame. Is that true? 54%. So I've got 8 hours of audiobook left. I'm listening at 2 times speed, so that'll be 4 hours maybe. I could finish that today while I go and do some housework and some Probably going to go for a run later tonight, maybe? It hasn't been raining as much, so that's definitely helpful. But anyway, Middlegame. I'm really loving it still. We're now kind of getting these little glimpses into the weirdness and like the strange time stuff that's going to be happening. But I love the way that it's still mostly a story of these two young people trying to navigate just life and the strange sibling dynamic that they have with each other. But then just little hints of like, something's not quite right here, and little hints of this alchemy organization interfering. We have also got Erin in the story now, and I've said Erin is my favorite character. I really think a lot of people overlook her part in the story, but it's so important. As well, Erin is part of kind of another twin group that represents order and chaos. So Roger and Dodger is language and maths, and then Erin and her brother are order and chaos. And like order and chaos is always like duality that's really interested me. So maybe that's also a part of why I find Erin to be such an interesting character. And like I think knowing what part Erin is going to play later in the story is even making me appreciate her part earlier in the story even more. So again, I'm really tempted just to drop everything else and just listen to Middlegame, but we'll try and be more balanced today. We'll try and get some things done. I am also still waiting to hear from my potential new job what's happening with that, but I'm also not going to be upset if I end up with another week of not working, so I'm not chasing them up because too bad, but I guess if I don't hear from them today, I'll have to message them. Anyway, potentially though, this could be my last weekday of not working, because tomorrow is a public holiday, a new public holiday. So we have Matariki now in New Zealand, which is like a Maori-based public holiday. I also really like the myth of Matariki because basically this god gets so mad that he just like pulls his eyes out and throws them across the sky, and like, you know, I just feel like that's really relatable. So I'm excited about a new public holiday, and maybe we'll even get some sun tomorrow so we could go out and enjoy nature rather than just being stuck at home all the time. Although also hopefully I can convince Jace to binge the rest of season 2 of Dark with me. We'll see.
If you set yourself on fire, I'd never let you burn. I would smoke you till my lungs hurt and love you till I'm dirt. Oh, I'm not sure where all this goes.
Hello. So technically it's Saturday, but it feels like a Sunday, and so I've pretty much just had a lazy Sunday, and maybe I'll have a productive Sunday tomorrow. We'll see what happens. No promises at this point. But what I have done is I managed to finish Fevered Star. It took me a lot longer to finish than I was hoping, but I did it. And like, I don't know that it's the book's fault that it took me a long time to finish it. What is my fringe doing? Honestly, my hair is a disaster. Just try not to look at it. I'm gonna wash it after this because I don't know what it's doing, and I cut my fringe and it's stupid, and anyway, you don't care. Let me tell you about Fevered Star. So I saw a lot of people saying that they thought this had like middle book syndrome, and I think I would kind of agree. I do feel like there's parts in this book where it's not clear what the motivations of the characters are, or it just feels like what they're doing is more convenient rather than what they really would want to be doing. And as well, I would say not much, like in some ways a lot happens and in other ways not much happens at all. And I still kind of felt like this book is a setup book for whatever's going to happen next. But at the same time, I'm kind of unsure whether what's going to happen next is really going to bring everything together in a satisfying way. But maybe. There are definitely some interesting elements. I really like the different gods and the parts they're playing. And I'm hoping in the third book, actually, that we'll get some of the Teak god, who would be like a god of the sea, brought into the picture. Because so far we've pretty much had the crow god and the sun god at war with each other, but like acting through different people. But I do think the sea god might have a part to play as well. But I think as well, just in general, it's kind of like building up to this war, and I'm never that interested in war. And for most of the characters, it just feels like they're interested in power for the sake of power and not much more than that, which again, not a motivation that makes me particularly excited. But still, the way that the gods are like coming into being or being represented is really interesting, and I do think she could do some really cool stuff with it. That said, to be honest, I would rather Rebecca Roanhorse focused on the Six World series than this, because I do like the Six World series better, but it's a very different kind of story. I think just for like a straight fantasy book, this is a pretty good one. But I feel like I've just read so much fantasy at this point that there wasn't enough in this to really excite me. But for people who've read less fantasy, or people who just find the elements in here particularly interesting, maybe it would be good. I mean, I feel like I'm saying negative things. I do think this was a good story, just it didn't blow me away like I was hoping. And even after my reread of Black Sun, I'm not sure that blew me away as much as the first time I read it. So now I'm a little bit like, we'll see what happens with the third book. Could go either way. So now, though, I get to start Seasonal Fears. And the other thing I did, actually, is I finished Middlegame. I loved it, as expected. The ending was everything I remembered. I think Erin's ending had less of an impact on me because I expected it, but I was still very annoyed that that's her ending, but just like not as upset as I was the first time when I was hoping she'd get a better ending than that. And I am really glad that I reread Middlegame before picking up Seasonal Fears, because I feel like there's got to be some elements from Middlegame that'll turn up in Seasonal Fears, right? There's got to be. So I will be keeping an eye out for that when I read this. I am still very nervous about this because of my experience with Under the Saltways Sea, Along the Saltways Sea it's called. I was really disappointed in that, which was doubly disappointing actually in Middlegame. Every time I would read the little quotes of the Up and Under, which is what Along the Saltways Sea is meant to be like a real life imagining of. Like, I'm explaining that very badly. So in Middlegame, there's this alchemist who'd written these children's books in order to get certain beliefs become normal within society. And it's a story kind of similar to Narnia. So it's like, you know, because so many people have read the stories of Narnia, the mythology of Narnia has become part of like our cultural beliefs. And so this other alchemist had written a similar story with the same kind of idea. And then Seanan McGuire went and wrote those books in real life as well. And I was really hopeful that those would be amazing. The first one I did really like. The second one I hated. And there's little snippets of those books throughout Middlegame, and it reminded me again of all the parallels between Middlegame and the Up and Under. And it just like doubly made me sad that Along the Saltways Sea wasn't what I was hoping for. And so, because of that, I am nervous about Seasonal Fears, but I'm going to read it now, and hopefully there's no reason to be nervous. Hopefully. I feel like this lighting is especially for Kat from Brews and Reviews to show that my roots much more purple than the rest of my hair, but it's getting better as my roots grow out. But every time I wash it, my roots keep the purple, the rest loses it straight away. But never mind, not straight away, but much quicker than the top. Anyway, today I was trying to have a productive Sunday, but fairly unsuccessful. But I did manage to do some things, most important of which for this vlog is that I managed to get 100 pages into Seasonal Fears. That's not that much because this is a 500-page book, but it's progress. And basically I've gotten far enough now to know what's going on. So we've got Melanie and Harry. They've been in a relationship since they were in kindergarten, but Melanie has some kind of heart defect, and so she's just kind of living her life expecting that at some point she's going to die. So we kind of jump through things a little bit. And now we're at the point where they're teenagers, they're still very much in love, but Melanie is really not expecting to live very much longer at all. But also, her father has some kind of dealings with the alchemist organization from Middlegame. And it seems like she's been kept alive using alchemy, but because of the alchemy, she is now a potential candidate to become like the representation of winter. And as it turns out, Harry is also a candidate to be like the representation of summer. So 100 pages in, they are just finding all this out. We don't really know the details. We don't really know exactly what her dad is up to, but we know that we don't trust him. And I expect we'll start learning a lot more as we go. But it is still very strange. It's also written in that same style as Middlegame, which I feel like I haven't really read anything else written in that style. It's very slow in some ways, and it's like telling you a lot of the details about these characters and all their different thoughts. And I can almost see that some people would see it as like telling rather than showing. But I almost feel like the way that it's telling you things makes it feel like there's some kind of deeper truth beneath it all. And somehow, to me, it makes the characters just feel very real, even within a very short amount of reading. So I am going to finish this later tonight. What I'm going to do now, though, is I am going to make myself get up and go for a run. And while I'm on my run, I will continue my audiobook. So I had to start a new audiobook because I don't know how to live life without reading an audiobook. And so the audiobook I decided to pick up is also a second book in a series. And that is the second book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I don't know the name of the book. But anyway, we've got this girl. I don't know her name either. Do I? No, I don't remember her name. And basically, at the moment, she's kind of well known because she solved this other missing person murder case in the first book, but she had said she wouldn't do any more of that because she felt like she put herself at risk. Her dog died. Just generally, she thinks it's probably not worth the risk of doing an investigation like that. However, her friend's brother has now gone missing, and that's kind of pulled her into the investigation. She doesn't really want to get involved, but also she can't really accept the idea that if she doesn't try to help and something bad really does happen to this guy, then she'll feel guilty for not having helped. So she's just started to get involved. I think I'm about a third of the way through. To be honest, the very beginning, I really wasn't into it. The audiobook narrator does some really awful voices for some of the characters. And just that very beginning was shaky, I think mostly because of that. But it did do a really good introduction and like a recap in the beginning. So I'm glad that it didn't decide I needed to reread the first book. I mean, I did read it not that long ago, so I think we're okay. And now that we're into this second investigation and she's like finding all the clues and putting everything together, I am really enjoying the story. So I'm glad I'll have that to take with me on my run. Hello, so please ignore... Oh, I've just remembered. I probably shouldn't film with the window open because the birds will be too noisy. Birdies, could you be quiet for a little while? They probably won't. Anyway, hi. There's a massive mess behind me because I'm in the middle of sorting out my office drawers and I'm discovering just how many Sharpies I have that I probably don't need, but I actually kind of enjoy having. Anyway, I wanted to update you on Middlegame, which I am now really sad about. I really liked the beginning and the introduction to the characters. I just called it Middlegame, didn't I? Seasonal Fears. Middlegame was great. Seasonal Fears, for starters. It seems clear that Middlegame was meant to align with Under the Woodward Wall, and this is meant to align with Along the Saltways Sea. And I think I've mentioned, I really didn't like Along the Saltways Sea, so when I figured that out, bad sign. But as I was saying, like, I really enjoyed the introduction to the characters, and the setup is really interesting, but then nothing happened. Like, I think I'm just past halfway now, but I've actually changed to the audiobook because I just couldn't get through this. It's just like repetitive descriptions of the alchemy, and the alchemy is not even that interesting. There's not even that much to it. I would say it's like a soft magic system. So how are you spending pages and pages explaining it? Well, it's really noisy in the background, actually. Hopefully I can cut that all out. Anyway, I had to change to the audiobook because it was just so tedious and so dragging. And like at first I was like, oh, it's just dragging a little bit, a few too many explanations. I'll just switch to the audiobook and then maybe I'll be able to get to the next thing that's going to happen more quickly. But I've listened to quite a bit of the audiobook now and still nothing is happening. We did get a little bit of Roger and Dodger, which I was expecting, more than I was expecting actually, but I didn't like it. And there's even one particular character that's in it that you might think I would be excited about. But actually, I'm annoyed about it. And it's just like constantly explaining the same thing, which is what I'm doing now. I can't believe that that's what this book is. But also, I'm kind of not surprised. So I have noticed with Seanan McGuire that she seems to do this. She has amazing ideas. And often the first book in a series will be amazingly executed. And then the follow-up books just don't quite match that same level of depth. And that's the problem we're having here. But I'm going to keep listening to it, and I guess I'll let you know final thoughts. It's possible It's possible that just the middle of the book is terrible and then stuff happens at the end. I'm trying to keep an open mind, so if that does happen, I can enjoy it. But anyway, I did also finish Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I worked out the second book is called Good Girl, Bad Blood. So I finished listening to that and I really enjoyed it. I will say the main character gets a little bit out of control, which I wasn't expecting, and I don't know if I like it. Like, there are a few bits where I was like, is that really what you're doing now? And it is kind of a theme of the book, like they're talking about the fact that she's getting out of control and that she gets so worked up in trying to solve these murders, or in this one it's a missing guy, but she gets so worked up in trying to solve them that she gets a little bit out of control. And I'm hoping there's a third book. Really will have to address that, right? Because sometimes it feels like she's almost on the border of doing some bad shit herself, even though she's just like a teenage girl. And of course, some of the stuff that happens is very unbelievable, that this would happen with a group of teenagers and that the adults wouldn't be more involved. But still, it was a fun story. I really liked the pace. I got very excited towards the end and I didn't want to put it down, which was another sign that this wasn't going well, because I wanted to read that instead of reading this. And that's not even a series that I was that excited about. But this is something I was super excited about. But, it's letting me down. Anyway, I'm going to keep sorting out all my Sharpies. And while I do that, I'll listen to the audiobook of this and maybe finish it off and let you know final thoughts. I'm not feeling that optimistic. Hello. So, it is a very grey and rainy day today. But I'm going to go out and return these 2 books to the library. So I thought I'd better give you final thoughts on Seasonal Fears. And unfortunately, the ending was also very disappointing. There were some interesting things set up and nothing was done with those interesting things. And like, the ending wasn't really surprising at all. I can kind of see one element that maybe Seanan McGuire thought might be surprising, but like, it was so minor and uninteresting. So no. The ending was boring. The story was boring. I'm so disappointed, but also like I had my fears that it might be like that. And unfortunately, I was right. So in the end, this one that I thought was like not quite as good as the first book in the series, this was less disappointing than this, which I was much more excited about. Because Middlegame, 5 stars. I love Middlegame, but Seasonal Fears just doesn't live up to it at all. Whereas Fever Star, like, it's not as good as Black Sun, but it's not that far down. Like, it still progresses things. It's just, like some people have said, a bit of a middle book where we're lacking in direction a little bit. And I think there's too much focus on kind of this war that's building rather than like the god-based magic and the individual characters' motivations. But I feel like this one could redeem itself in the 3rd book. This series, I don't even know if there's another book in the series whether I would be interested in continuing it. I mean, I probably would, because Middlegame was so great, but I would go into it being afraid that it was going to be like this and be disappointing. So we didn't do so good at second books in series, although Good Girl, Bad Blood, that one wasn't too bad. In fact, possibly that one was better than the first book, whereas these 2, not quite. This was about the same, this was well below. So sometimes this does make me question my focus on Series 0 and trying to complete series, because if the rest of series always disappoint you, then is it worth continuing them? I would love to run some stats on that at some point, on all the series I've completed, whether I thought they were actually worth the effort. I'm sure there are plenty that are. Anyway, do let me know if you've read any of these books or whether you're thinking about continuing this series, because I would love to talk with you about them down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.